So hello everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Abstracts, here for another episode today with Leni Dam. Leni, thank you for joining me today. And I'll have introduced you in the text accompanying the show, but would you be able to give a brief introduction?
Hello, Tom, and hello, everybody. Yes, very briefly, I was a normal teacher as well as math in a primary and secondary school, starting already in 1976, but in 1970, no, from 1967. But in 1976, I had a class of teenagers, unmotivated learners, and not interested at all. And then I thought something has to be done, which was what I then called experiments in teaching and learning. I wanted to make the learners actively involved in their own learning. And later on, that was labeled when I came across Henri Ouellech's writings around 1980. I labeled it Learner Autonomy. So in addition to being a normal teacher, I also had a second post as an in-service teacher trainer and developer of school developments at the higher school for teacher education in Copenhagen and Zealand. And there I used my own experiences in passing on to teachers that I hoped would actually take over learner autonomy. Yeah, but after 50 years, not enough have done it.
Yes, and there are many, many more career accomplishments. We could talk about the many books, many kind of research items as well. We were just discussing this volume here, which is the Learner Autonomy from Theory to Classroom Practice. I think it's from 1995. Also,
that's it. Originally, correct? It has recently been translated into German because there are quite a number of German Montessori teachers who are doing learner autonomy. So, and because they are not educated English teachers, then it's useful for them. Yes.
Yeah,
and of course, all the workshops, unfortunately not in Denmark, but around the world. Yes. That's where I can spread the message.
Yes, I think I've spoken to some of those Montessori teachers as well in Germany.
Yes,
so there's a lot of good work being done. And you've continued to publish as well as teaching for a long time. Is there something in this, you mentioned 50 years, is there something in that career that you're particularly it stands out that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, from all these years, of course, there are many, many, many highlights. When you go into learn autonomy, then your life as a teacher is good. I can recommend that. But if there is one that I must sort of take out, then I still remember the day many years ago when a 12-year-old girl came to me, and then passing me in the doorway, she said, "You know, Leni, last night I dreamt in English." And that is to me something that I have managed to have a class where the students are so involved in making use of their the target language that they see dreaming in English as something essential.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's one of the highlights.
Yeah. Well, I certainly can't compare my career to yours. I am a teacher and I've got those moments, I'm sure anyone that's been a teacher has, where it has nothing to do with all the lesson planning and all the practical or technical side of teaching, but where you actually see the small thing, where you see the reward of your work coming back and it validates everything that you had been doing. Yeah, for sure. So one of the research and practice things that I wanted to focus on today is this big work. It was called Language Learner Autonomy Theory, Practice and Research. It was published in 2017 by you, but also by David Little and Lienhard Legenhausen. And it's a pretty influential book. And in preparation for our talk today, I read it cover to cover and I enjoyed that a lot. It was a good read, a practical read, I think. And one chapter I wanted to focus on in our conversation today is about language learner autonomy as it relates to the teachers. We've been talking about teachers a little bit already, and that's chapter 8. And I think that's quite relevant to the audience of the podcast. So before we talk about the role of teachers, as it were, you use this term a lot, the autonomy classroom, in the book. Could you give us a sense of what that is?
An autonomous classroom. Yeah, that is where the aim, the teacher's aim, is really to get, as I said, as one of my highlights and my previous work, to get the learners actively involved in their own learning. And that's a long process that can't be done overnight. I had one teacher who did it overnight. That was chaos. But step by step, passing over responsibility to the learners, getting involved in their own learning. And I think that is the autonomy classroom. And also recently, I've become more and more aware of the fact that really what is a difference between the so-called traditional classroom is that in the autonomy classroom, it's a constant use of the target language between learners and the teacher and among the learners themselves. So it's the authentic use of the target language. So you won't see people sitting drilling. There might be at an advanced level that they have decided we want to focus on a grammatical issue. But in general, it's using the language in context where there is a constant reflection also during the group work and producing language. And I can see that is more and more, and where the teacher enters into this discussion with her learners. And also that the target language is used from the very beginning by the teacher.
So
I think that, and also the three division of a lesson, the teacher time, learner time, and together time, is also very noticeable for the learner autonomy classroom, because there's this structure. You can feel and see the structure, because it's not sort of very often in a traditional teaching. The structure really is hidden for the learners. The teacher might see the structure, or at least she believes that she sees a structure, but it's hidden for the learners. In this respect, in the autonomy classroom, as I see it, there is a very clear structure. The learners know what is expected of them, what is going to happen, and they are involved in this structure. And of course, another very clear change to the traditional is the use of logbooks, that the learners document their learning. This continuous use of the logbook as the learners' documentation of their learning journey.
Okay, so there's a lot there. Constant use of target language, kind of authentic communication that's relevant to
the authenticity is
right. And constantly reflecting on the learning, kind of clear division of time that's made explicit. So
so
everyone's
teacher time is the teacher's time. The learner time, learners, and the teacher time will differ from beginners level to the more advanced levels, because the learners take over more and more, whereas the together time will be will take up quite some space, because at beginners level it will be the social aspect, singing songs, listening to stories, making games, and talking about the lesson, whereas at advanced level it will be presenting of topics and project work and evaluation in general of the day, the social aspect.
Okay, so underpinning all of this structure, I hope, is the teacher. Can you sketch out a bit more what the role of the teacher is in this situation in the autonomous classroom?
Yeah, I mean, what I say again and again in my courses and to my teachers is really stop teaching and start supporting learning. And in other words, I tell them, say, stop thinking about how you best teach this or that of grammatical issues, perhaps, and start thinking in terms of how can I best support my learners in learning this or that according to the curricular guidelines, because of course the teacher is still responsible for what is going on in the classroom. I mean, that's why she's there. But this whole issue of how do I best, which activities will best support, how can I make use of which kind of activity, that's where I talk very much about umbrella activities, where every learner can take part, the weak ones as well as the clever ones, and get something out of it. Which activity can I introduce where they will learn this or that?
Right.
I think that's a very important issue.
Okay, that's a nice summary. So a kind of facilitator or a sheepdog, perhaps, guiding the...
Yes, something like that. Definitely, step by step, letting the learners taking over more and more. But they need guidance. They need support in that process.
Okay. And so you're in Denmark. I'm in Japan. One of the things that you emphasize a lot in the book is this constant use of the target language. In this case, we're talking about English, and you mentioned it today as well. In my experience in Japan, that's sometimes is an issue for teachers here, purely by, the fact that they've not had that exposure often to that kind of autonomy classroom, perhaps themselves, or because it's Japan, the opportunities to use English communicatively that much outside. So that's challenging for them. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the role of the target language in the autonomy classroom.
It's frightening for them. On the other hand, as you said, in Japan, they are not used to it in their education, and that's another point of the teacher. You teach the way you have been taught. In most cases, I mean, you can have a lot of theory and perhaps sort of partly practice, but deepest down, when you're faced with a class of 23, and then you tend to do what you have been taught yourself. And unfortunately, teacher educators do not teach the way that we think they should be teaching. So therefore, it's very difficult. And that's also why in teacher education, the target language use is not used as much as it should. They teach in the mother tongue, and then they have exercises, tasks, problems. So the teacher trainees do not learn the language. So they come out and do not have it as an internal tool, because they have not been used to what we are aiming at in the autonomous classroom, that you can reflect in the target language, similar to the one who dreamt in English, and that you can have authentic language use. Unfortunately, it's not authentic what is going on in many, many language classrooms. As I normally say, don't ask questions that you can answer yourself. Because that's what teachers do again and again. And when I gave a talk at the IATEFL, I said, imagine that outside a foreign language classroom is a big, big banner saying, forget that you're normal. because you're now entering a foreign language classroom. Because in the foreign language classroom, things go on that are not normal. You don't have an authentic communication and conversation. So therefore, it's so important that everything takes place in the target language in order for you to really be a good, we are also talking about language learning, not only being autonomous, but we are talking about how can I learn the language best. And that is by the use, that the constant way of using is using the target language.
So that's, the foundational role of the teacher there in the autonomy classroom, kind of modeling the behavior that you want to see in the students. They themselves, that has to start earlier in their own training as well with that kind of
that's one thing. And if that is, and unfortunately we do not get into the teacher training centers. It's very difficult but they are the ones who really should be changed. But if it's not the case, then my advice to teachers would be, even though you do not feel secure in the target language, one has to believe that it's so important that it's used from the very beginning in order to set up an authentic dialogue with the learners. And then they have to think in terms of, well, my learners do not know much English. I'm not perfect, but I should try. So that my piece of advice, try as much as you can in the target language, because it's important.
So let's think about individual teachers. Say you were in the position to advise a new teacher, or perhaps someone that's just coming into the profession. And as you just mentioned, often, this kind of dialogue that we're having now is not getting into their teacher training, so often, but perhaps they've heard about your ideas, or then they are interested in running a classroom, an autonomy classroom. How would you advise somebody that doesn't have years and years of experience behind them to get started?
First, I mean, that's being a teacher could be seen, and I advocate that as well, that see teaching as action research, really, that you see different ways of things that you would like to promote, or things you would like to change, or things you would like to, as a topic, and then plan from that out, evaluate, and make the evaluation the starting point for the next plan. If a young teacher sees her teaching as action research, then it might be easier to see where could I start, and what would I like? I would like to get them involved. I would like, etc. But also that she might feel secure by doing that. She might, first of all, if she wants to carry out learner autonomy, she has to believe in the principles.
Sure.
And I think that lately I have seen quite a number of young teachers, because they believe in the humanistic approach of learner autonomy, the democracy aspect of it, that we should be involved. Nobody can teach us what we want to learn. We have to do the learning ourselves. One of my learners said once, you have to do something if you want to learn. So, and they want to be active, that this change from being told what to do to actually being involved. I think that is an aspect that the young teacher, and when she first tries this and gets into a dialogue with her learners, then she'll find out the way that I found out when I started, that suddenly you are not on your own. Suddenly you can share your problems, your thoughts, your beliefs with the learners and say, I would like to try this out. Let us see how it works, and let us talk about it. So that suddenly it's a dialogue with her learners. If she senses that, then I think she's well on her way.
And what needs to be done on a school level, say, to support a teacher like that, taking this kind of systematic action researchy approach to learning to be a teacher, facilitator, how could a school be better set up to help a teacher like that?
It would, of course, be lovely if a headmaster or headmistress also, if they had all teachers work along the same lines, because that would be easier for the students. However, all teachers are different, whether they are for learner autonomy or not. I think that our learners are the most flexible people in the world. Imagine that they every 45 minutes have to enter a classroom with a new teacher, with a new way of humor, with a new way of rules, chewing gum, not chewing gum, hats, not chewing, etc. So even though it would be great if a whole school could be set up for learner autonomy, we can't expect it. So I think it's important to stress that each teacher, if she lives up to the curricular guidelines, if she has a good contact with her parents and explains what she is doing, why she is doing it, then it is possible to carry out and develop learner autonomy, even though you are on your own.
And you mentioned, sorry to interrupt. You mentioned the curricular guidelines there. Mm-hmm. That's very much a top-down thing that is, that autonomy.
But it's there. And of course, also in the autonomy classroom, you as a teacher have to live up to that. The difference from traditional teaching, language teaching, is that in many, and I've really been around the world, in many cases, the course book, the textbook, is to a large extent the curriculum. Many teachers do not even know what is in the real curricular guidelines because they trust that they are included in the course book. So you have to live up to them. In my case, in the autonomy classroom, I give the curricular guidelines to my learners. I say, this is what you have to learn. This is the type of exam you have to pass. These are the demands when you're going to be assessed. Then they know it, and the better ones can say, well, I'm quite good at this and this and this. I have to focus on that, etc. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why curricular guidelines should not be seen as something bad, but something helpful, because it can be passed on to the learners.
And it's part of this making things explicit. Exactly. So it's kind of shared knowledge, right, that everybody has.
Exactly.
So perhaps, in a sense, the early career or pre-service teacher is the easiest convert to this way of thinking about their classroom. They're maybe, because they're at a very malleable stage maybe in their development.
Because they're going to start. So why not start with learner autonomy instead of the and because the effect of learner autonomy is motivated learners. I mean, that is the key issue. I mean, many of my teachers come, I've got unmotivated learners. But so that you're right in that respect.
Yeah. How about, say, you were tasked to do an in-service training for some, and you don't have a group of fresh-faced new teachers, but some kind of mid-career or even veteran teachers in there?
That would be most of my course participants.
Okay.
They would be halfway through there, and mind you, as I said, many of them are tired of the situation because they do not know what to do with these unmotivated learners. So many of them are much attracted by the whole thought, how can I get my learners involved and motivated? So small things like giving them a logbook, start asking them what they would like to do, giving them choices even within the textbook. I mean, they have to use a textbook, but they have to use it in a different way. They have to make the textbook also the ownership of the learners. They should get to know it. So you shouldn't go step by step, but use it in a different way. Let the learners have a look at it. What do we like? What don't we like? And start thinking in terms of how can it be used according to. So I think in many cases, the evaluation is also a good way for these teachers to get started. When you have had a normal lesson, at the end of it, start asking the learners, what was good, what was bad, what could we do differently? These small things is useful, or are useful for the teachers. However, when they come back to the school and their own environments, they have the colleagues, they have the parents, and then it's a struggle to convince. So that's why it's good. I mean, this is a course plan that I have for workshops, that you get the teachers in, give them new ideas, go out, use it, come back with their experiences, etc. So an ongoing education. But yeah, again, not enough. But
there's a lot of supportive architecture needed there on the school level, and wider as well, to kind of shift the values of people and their expectations around
But also, Tom, I think the problem is really that teachers are not used to this idea of planning, carrying out, evaluating. They are so used to the textbook, so it's completely new for them to work in this way, and also thinking about what am I actually doing, instead of just taking over after the textbook. So my questions: why do I do this? How do I do it? With what results?
Right.
That is new to many teachers, constantly to do that and keep a logbook themselves for writing down these things. I think, that is needed for many teachers.
So you said that basically your approach is to try and simplify this approach to kind of training teachers into this way of thinking and into their own approach to their classrooms. One of the common factors, whatever country you're in, is going to be the textbook, as you've said a lot of times. That often has a central role in the classroom. So say that you have a teacher in front of you at one of your workshops and they want to, adopt this way of thinking, this autonomy-oriented approach to their job, but they've got a required textbook in hand. What would you tell that teacher?
I would say that it's important. You have the course book or textbook, and it is also the possession of the learners. So that was my first. So if I'm going to start a class, which is always the easiest, I would definitely give them a logbook. My starting point would be the getting hold of the learners by giving them a logbook and introduce them to documenting their own learning, making them aware of the fact that I'm the one to learn, and you as a teacher are going to support me in learning. And we are going to use this textbook as a tool and a help for our journey into learning. And then probably when at a beginner's level, I would similarly to telling the learners what they are expected to learn during this period from the curricular guidelines, I would ask them in pairs to go through the textbook and have a look. What do I like? What don't I like? What do I find interesting, etc.? Where would I like to start? And then collect that, and then perhaps find a way into the textbook instead of using it page by page and unit by unit, because there are so many dead, boring units in these textbooks. I mean, you and I would get bored as well. And then I would start thinking in terms of which text, and that would be the learner's choice then. That's the important thing also in the learner autonomy thing, that there are choices. Because if you get choices, then you have to reflect. And then you start reflecting, and then you are partly responsible. So you have to think in terms of how can I make use of texts? How can I perhaps have the learners asking questions instead of the ridiculous questions posed by the authors? Which activities are relevant to use and which are just waste of time?
Yep.
Could I make possible say this, you have to do this because so and so. Otherwise you can choose, but you have to say why you have chosen them. And then also think in terms of additional ways of working away from the course book, textbook, not as the way of help or support, but what can we do in connection with the textbook?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's really important. I do it the same in my own classrooms. I love giving the students the chance to choose the units and choose the activities they want to do within that. It's definitely a valuable thing.
That sounds good. You should make an interview with yourself, how to make use of the textbook. Sounds good.
The structure that you mentioned earlier in our conversation, the kind of 3-part lesson structure with the teacher time and then something learner time and then a together time.
And together time.
So where does in the bringing back to that example of the teacher who's got to use this textbook in their class and you're advising them, where would the textbook go in that structure of a lesson?
It would probably be similar to when I said at the beginner's level, the teacher's time is used for introducing activities to be carried out. I could imagine that then that would be in teacher time, would be the time where you and your learners get to into the textbook and see what does it, and perhaps together with the learners, so there will be an overlap, but together with the learners decide how to make use of the textbook. And in that connection, I would also say that's where it is extremely important to involve the parents and tell them, because parents are used to textbooks used in the normal way. But if you're going to do it in a different way, then to inform the parents, I am going to use the textbook in this way with your daughters and sons, so that they know. But that's where the teacher time should be used, I could imagine. And also if you work with a specific thing, which introduced by saying which activities should be done, which activities could be done, etc. And then leave it to the learner's time to work with the textbook.
Then they can kind of select the particular parts that they want to work with. I see. Right. Now that makes a lot of sense.
In the together time, there will be a common, how did it go with you? Which activities did you choose, etc. So that they feel that it's the social aspect also. We did this, oh, you did this, was that good? So they give them ideas for good activities or whatever. Can you follow me?
Yes,
so that's actually a very active tool the course book is turned into.
No, I like how you're bringing the choice in there and then making the discussion about it explicit. It's very democratic.
And then the language you learning during this discussion is much more important than doing a sheet of paper with questions and answers.
Do you think this model is scalable to different levels of education? So, for example, you mentioned younger learners before, but say you get to a more advanced class and they have very kind of concrete needs that, you know, maybe they want to learn to write an academic essay or something because they have to. is this a scalable model for a way for a teacher to conduct the class?
Yeah. It would just be less time. I mean, with advanced learners, and when they know what to do and how to do it, the teacher's time might just be a few minutes saying, okay, today there is a new thing from the community or from municipality, or otherwise I expect you to carry on with what you have planned to do. You have to remember that in the autonomy classroom, the learners themselves make posters. What am I going to do? Why? How? And when am I going to present it? I mean, it's all very structured. So it's a matter of just saying, well, go on with what you have decided with your plans. And we will meet at 9:10 in together time and hear what you have come up with. Yeah, it works perfectly. I mean, the problem is that, clever learners, at least in my classes, would say, Leni, do you really need your time next lesson? Because we are so involved in our projects.
Well, those sound like some great learners. Yeah, no, I'm sure you're a very inspirational teacher. You mentioned earlier in the conversation that you had this idea of teaching as action research. You said a teacher, or not young necessarily, but an early career or pre-service teacher should approach their job as a kind of systematic way where they try something, test it, observe the effect, make a change on it. Is that something you think should be kind of formalized when we teach teachers to be teachers? That should be part of their teacher training to see their job in that way?
Definitely, because I think that action research is really what goes on in every language classroom by the teacher. And developing learner autonomy means, when I told you that my learners would have very structures and posters with their plans, I believe that my learners actually are action researchers as well, because they say, I would like to learn this or that, or I'm not quite sure how you say this or that. This is what I'll go into. So they are small action researchers of their own learning. So yes, it should be. We should think in these reflective is important, much more important than, of course, the theory and the grammar, etc. is also, but it should be seen as tasks and areas to be researched.
Yes, yeah. And I can see that as easily as a kind of informal practice of a teacher, kind of observing their classroom.
And if you do that, then automatically the use of authentic target language use will be involved, because you talk about what you are going and how you're doing it, not only specific tasks within the language.
And it's going to be very locally meaningful to them, right? That's the nature of action research, right? Yeah. So you mentioned earlier being a teacher trainer yourself. We've talked about learner autonomy. We've talked about teacher autonomy. Is there such a thing as teacher trainer autonomy? I don't think this is a topic that's covered in your book or in the chapter, but it interested me. Is there such a thing, and what would that look like?
Yeah, but teacher trainer autonomy, that is, in my view, teacher trainer autonomy is how you yourself plan what you're going to do. I mean, there are rules, there are guidelines that you have to include in your training, and you can't just do anything. You have to respect these things. So sometimes I'm a bit, I don't know what, when talk is about teacher autonomy, because we are underlying certain structures and certain rules that we have to live up to. And within that, I believe that we can do what we find best. Isn't that the case? Does it make sense when I talk about that? To me, teacher autonomy is there, but similar to when you talk about learner autonomy, they can do things, but it's not like a supermarket. And that's one of the difficulties, that some people believe that learner autonomy is more or less chaos, where learners can choose whatever they want to do from the shelves in a supermarket. And no, they can't. There are certain demands within which they can choose and be autonomous. But it's not a matter of doing whatever you want to do. You are responsible for certain things. And I think that goes for teacher autonomy as well.
And for teacher trainers as well.
And for teacher trainers, yes, yes.
Right. Okay. That's an interesting thought. I'm mindful of your time. I don't want to take up too much of it, but is there anything else?
I just wanted, because very often people ask for evidence, and of course I have written a lot, David has written a lot, we have done our research, etc., and we have not enough classroom data, because that's good. But I would just mention the video that I did also all the way back till 1995, but it's now on YouTube in connection with our book, and it's called Autonomous Language Learning in Action. And that shows me with my 9th formers doing project work. And it might be useful for teachers to have a look at, because it does show the interaction. I don't know if you've seen it, but I very often use it in my workshops, asking people, what do you notice? And bring them into the whole thing, instead of saying, look how good it is, but what do you notice?
Yeah, it's nice to see it in front of you. And yes, I watched it too in preparation for our conversation, and I'll be sure to link to it so that anyone watching this can easily find it as well.
Good, good. Yeah, I still think it's. I even have the same earrings.
Good quality.
Yes.
Yeah. So just to close it out, what kind of closing remarks could you make to any kind of young people considering, following your career path? What would you tell them? Any words of wisdom?
I mean, you shouldn't have added the last thing, words of wisdom. But I think that my piece of advice to teachers, beginners as well as in-service teachers, if you want to feel good as being a teacher, if you want to feel that you are not alone with whatever you want to do as a teacher, but that you are cooperating with your learners and you have the feeling of something is happening, then go ahead. It's really worthwhile. You will never forget it. Oh no, regret it, not forget it, regret it. Yes, no, not forget it, regret it, because it's a completely different way of being a teacher than also what I myself experienced before I started experimenting in teaching and learning.
Wonderful. So I think that's a nice note to leave it on. So the book was Language Learner Autonomy, Theory, Practice and Research. It was published by Multilingual Matters in 2017. That's by David Little, Leni Dam and Lienhard Legenhausen. So I'll definitely link to it underneath this video. And Leni, thank you very much for your time. It's been a wonderful conversation.
You were welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.